everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all today. I don't know what possessed me, but for some reason I decided it was a good idea to read and now review even more BDSM erotica. What happens is around this time of year, it's so nice and sunny and I want to go outside, enjoy the sun, read, have my big old sunglasses on, have my big wide-brimmed black hat, and just have my Kindle and enjoy some books. But during the winter, I burn myself out on reading educational BDSM stuff or things about polyamory, and I just want, a light, easy summer read. And for me, that is what BDSM erotica kind of is. Now, if you're not familiar with my channel, hi, again, I'm Evie. I am primarily a BDSM educator, so when I read BDSM erotica, I am trying to find stuff that I think accurately represents doing kink and BDSM. And I know that erotica is fantasy. However, I do like to try and find the areas where there is accurate kink representation because, as we very well know from the popularity of things like 50 Shades of Grey, people do find BDSM through erotica. And so I think there is something of a responsibility that erotica authors maybe have to at least have a little bit of like a hint of accuracy, something to kind of point somebody in the right direction, or at least that's what I'm using as my framework for when I look at erotica. So I know in my reviews I can be a little bit harsh, just a forewarning, because I do have those higher expectations, but I do acknowledge that different people are going to be reading erotica for different reasons and have different tolerance levels, let's say, for the accuracy and the plot line of a book. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. I have 4 books to talk about today, and the first one is called Bared to You. I think it's Bared to You, Barred to You. I think it's Bared to You. And that is the first book in the Crossfire series by Sylvia Day. I want to say Sylvia Path. That is another author. Completely different genre. And the reason why I picked this one is because if there is any book that is trying to live up to the reputation, the hype of the 50 Shades of Grey franchise, it is this book. I remember back in the day when I would go to Lovers to just like browse or get condoms or whatever, that this book would be like front, stage and center, right alongside 50 Shades of Grey in the book section. And even now, if you go to like Goodreads, Amazon, you look up like best BDSM erotica, like almost every book in this series, which I believe is a trilogy, or maybe it's 5 books, I don't remember. Almost all of the books are in the top 5, maybe the top 10 of those lists. So like this is a really, really popular book. It has really great reviews, but of course, does it live up to that hype? Now, I am going to be reading the like back cover blurbs for each one of these just to give you a sense of the marketing behind these books before we get into the actual review. So let's see what they have to say about Bared to You. The New York Times and #1 international bestseller, Gideon Cross, came into my life like lightning in the darkness. He was beautiful and brilliant, jagged and white hot. I was drawn to him as I'd never been to anything or anyone in my life. I craved his touch like a drug, even knowing it would weaken me. I was flawed and damaged, and he opened those cracks in me so easily. Gideon knew. He had demons of his own, and we would become the mirrors that reflected each other's most private worlds and desires. The bonds of his love transformed me, even as I prayed that the torment of our past didn't tear us apart. Now, because this book was so heavily marketed right alongside 50 Shades of Grey, when it was really, really popular. I think maybe even the first movie was like even in the works or came out around when this was kind of blowing up. I was expecting that this was going to be another rich billionaire dom taking on a new submissive, you know, plucked from obscurity, and that they were going to have like hot, raunchy, kind of DS light sex, maybe a little bit of other kink activities like sprinkled in there. But we will see how accurate that initial assessment was as we get into talking about this book, because first I'll just give a little bit of like a rundown of the plot. Essentially what happens is our main character Eva is a new worker at an ad agency in New York. The building is called Crossfire, if that gives you a hint. And she runs into the extremely handsome Gideon Cross while she is trying to like time out her commute to work before her first day. And instantly they have this like really intense like sexual urge for each other. And what ends up happening is very quickly Gideon Cross is like, I want to fuck you. And she is obviously like very disgusted by this advance, even though she does also experience that really intense attraction towards him. And her roommate slash best friend Carrie, who is a bisexual man, go on like a drink tour of New York to try and like just, I guess, celebrate their first week or like get over Gideon or whatever. And what ends up happening is Gideon apparently has this like whole plan where he like knows where she's going, and he like very accurately places this, I don't know what they're called, but like the sign guys, the promo guys that are like, here, get this ticket, free drinks, ladies, free on Saturdays or whatever. And they get a ticket to go to this club, and they're like, ooh, let's check it out. This seems really fancy. They go in, boom, Gideon Cross is there, and he's like, ha ha ha, you fell for my trap. This is where I wanted you. Sure, okay, why not? And somehow, through this series of interactions, they start having a sexual relationship. Now, his last name is Cross. The name of the building is Crossfire. Can you guess what happens? If you guessed that he owns the building, you would be correct. Now, he doesn't own the company that she works for. He does own a brand that they are doing ad work for. So they share office space, different floors of the building, and basically as soon as they start their initially sexual-only relationship, he's very possessive, he's demanding of her time, like he's like, see me today, 4 o'clock, and it's like 3:30 in the afternoon. Heaven forbid she have like a doctor's appointment, because he is not taking no for an answer. He's just gonna get what he wants. And it somehow just keeps escalating, where basically what they end up doing is having a lot of like very hot, raw, primal, sheet-tearing sex. And I think what ended up happening in the marketing for this book is they conflated it with 50 Shades and made it seem like kink happens. But spoiler alert, no kink happens in this book. I was tricked. I was lied to. I am not happy about this. There are some allusions to kink. There's like, if you sass me one more time, I'm gonna put you over my knee. She is never put over his knee, at least in this first book, as far as I can remember. And I kind of went into a mental faraway place at times while reading this, so maybe my memory has sort of left me on that one. But I don't remember any kink happening in this. It's just, I think the erotica trope is called like alpha male, right? So this is kind of where like Christian Grey comes from. It's not like E.L. James invented Christian Grey out of nowhere. This is a very popular erotica trope where there's this like aggressive, very handsome, very chiseled guy that is like, I'm not gonna take no for an answer, and I'm possessive and stalkery and very jealous even of your best friend, bisexual roommate, and I'm just gonna like have you be my whole world. And like, again, E.L. James did not invent that. That is a very, very popular trope. And that's essentially what Gideon Cross is. He's not really kinky. He's not a dom. He is just an aggressive alpha male sort of character, more or less. And over the course of this series, or at least this book, it's very interesting because the whole initial plot is like, okay, we're just going to have a sexual relationship. Eva, or Eva, of course, wants to have more. She wants to have romance. She doesn't just want to be like his fuck toy that shows up and then that's it. And so they kind of navigate falling in love and having a romance. But here's the confusing thing. If this is focused around romance, these characters have nothing in common. Like, the only thing they have in common is wanting to bone, and they go to a gym once, and they both, like, oogle each other from across the room and are like, wow, he's hot. Wow, she's hot. Wow, I'm fucking such hot people. And that's about as much as they have in common. And so it's really hard to buy this as a romance. You know, for me, if I am looking for something that is romantic, I want to see these characters connect on a personal level. I want to see them do shared interests together. I want to see them introducing each other to hobbies. Like, I want there to be that, like, non-sexual connection. And that just doesn't happen in this book. I would say that the sex scenes, in my professional opinion, are well written. I can see why people really enjoy them. They are very, like, steamy and passionate. However, what I would counter that with is there is very little environmental description in this book. The only thing I remember is at the very beginning, they say that the weather is wicked hot because I guess this is Boston and not New York. And so you know it's summer at the very beginning, but besides that, there's not really a good sense of time, weather, temperature. Like, there's moments where that could have been utilized, I think, to even more impactful effect, right? You know, reflecting the character's emotion in the environment just does not happen. And if you're like me, you like having a very detailed sense of the world that you're in, right? So like, how big are these spaces? Are they small and intimate? Are they really big and open and grandiose? You know, is it warm? Is it cold? You know, does she need his jacket because it's chilly on their date? Do they wear like light, frilly clothing? Well, not both of them. This is not a book about sissification. Just her, obviously, wearing frilly clothing. You know, what is it? How does that reflect in their fashion, in their behavior? You know, and there's really just a lot of missed opportunity for that, which really made it hard for me to like feel in the world of this book. Now, one thing I really wished I would have known about this book going into it, and there needs to be a content warning for this, is both of the characters, at least it seems, have fairly traumatic experiences in their lives. But what ends up happening is it is revealed over the course of the book that our heroine experienced sexual trauma at the hands of her stepbrother, including sexual intercourse, I believe, around when she was 12 years old. This is something that has stayed with her for a very long time, obviously. And Gideon Cross essentially does extremely sexual things during his sleep, like violent masturbation, trying to touch her, and I guess, I googled it, this is actually a thing. It's called Sexsomnia? Essentially what happens is there is, to some extent, a degree of extreme or just general sexual behavior that happens when you are like between sleep stages. And of course, this ends up colliding in literally the most dramatic, explosive way possible in this book. And Gideon ends up nearly raping her in her sleep and in his sleep while she is having a traumatic flashback to an instance of sexual assault that she experienced with her stepbrother. And the only reason it stops is because her best friend, roommate person, Carrie, ends up intervening and pulling Gideon off of her because he's asleep. He doesn't realize what's going on. Eventually, he wakes up, and the reason I have a problem with this is because so many of these books take extremely heavy topics and treat them as like plot material, character drama, right? The reason these people have character drama is because they've had these really terrible things happen to them that have these behaviors happen in the present, and it's all really terrible and awful. But this book doesn't have this skill to like handle that gracefully or even really respectfully, because literally the reason why these things are in these characters' past is to like make them edgy and like give them something to conflict over, which is maybe not the best possible use of childhood sexual trauma in a book that is filled with like 80% wall-to-wall sex acts. It seems like a weird balance to try and strike, and I really don't think that they were able to do that. Now, they do at least pay lip service to the idea of doing couples therapy and recognizing that they have issues. However, the therapist that Gideon ends up going to try and start doing this is the same therapist that sees Eva's mother, who is a helicopter parent that is also married to like her, number 47 husband, because, the mom's a gold digger essentially, but the book doesn't say that, but that's the implication. It's like, oh, she just married for money. And so also another point of this is that Eva, I don't know what to call her. No one told me how to pronounce her name. She is good for Gideon because she has the good sense to not be concerned with money, because her mom already has all of the big buku bucks from basically being a trophy wife, and so she is not impressed by money as a good, godly woman should be, because it's good to have money. You just shouldn't really want it. But that point aside, the therapist that they tried to see is also the therapist to her mom, and she also does joint sessions with her mom sometimes. So this therapist is seeing 4 people that are all family members or dating each other in various configurations. And I'm not a professional therapist, but it certainly seems like it would be difficult to be an objective third party able to help everybody in the ways that they need to be helped when you are that entangled in that many family members and that just sheer volumes of configuration. So I don't really think that works. I guess they just didn't want to introduce another character, which, like, okay, fine. I don't understand what is like wrong with these books and how they talk about therapy and psychiatrists, and we'll talk about that in the next book because it comes up. And so essentially, that's my review of Bared to You. It doesn't have BDSM in it. I'm disappointed. You're disappointed. Let's move on. And so, of course, after having that entire, not actually doing BDSM at all experience of reading the last book, I, of course, wanted to make sure to pick something that absolutely would have BDSM in it. And so I picked up Enthrall, which is the first book in a series by Vanessa Fewings, and this is what it has to say about itself on the back of the cover. Experience the USA Today best-selling novel that introduced readers around the globe to Miola Wren and her breathtaking journey into the seductive world of Enthrall, the most exclusive BDSM club in LA. Mia Loren is a single 21-year-old working in a West Hollywood art store who dreams of one day becoming a fashion designer. When an unexpected offer arises to work at Enthrall, LA's premier fetish club for the wealthy, Mia accepts. It's a salary beyond her wildest imagination. Mia becomes a secretary to the club's assistant director, blonde and broody Richard Booth. Richard is not only one of LA's most beautiful and wealthiest men, he is also the club's senior dominant. Mia is both drawn and terrified when he reveals flashes of his white-hot passion, threatening an unbound pleasure like no other. She knows her attraction may be her undoing, but the spellbinding feelings render her powerless to resist his advances. What Mia cannot know is that Enthrall's dashing director, 34-year-old Cameron Cole, who is also the club's psychiatrist, has lured Mia to save his best friend and patient Richard from his obsession and thrill-seeking. Cameron masterfully sets up sexy scenarios to ensure the collision of Richard and Mia, hoping that love will save him. However, despite Cameron's noble intentions, he also finds himself enticed by Mia's haunting innocence. Passion and pleasure stir, forming a dangerous love triangle. This is the world of the forbidden. This is the embrace of Enthrall. That is a fucking long introduction to a book. So let's start out with what I actually liked about this book. I liked the environmental description. There is definitely a lot more of that in this book compared to the last one. So if you're like me, that's going to be a bonus. And I like the fact that it is set in a BDSM club. That is my favorite setting for books like this. I like when there's clubs and community and play space. I love that. I was really excited to see that in this book. Also, I like the fact that there is this office setting that happens where there are these female doms that our main character can bond with and kind of have some female friendships. They don't necessarily fully come out in this book, but it is there and I do appreciate it. Now, I want you all to strap yourselves in because this plot line is just Cocoa Banana Puffs, okay? It's all over the place. So basically the plot line for this book is that Mia goes to a job interview, basically for the money, to work at the BDSM club Enthrall. And she goes through an audition, she makes it, and she starts working at the office. Now, the office work seems to basically mean everyone drinking coffee every 2 pages and answering emails, but she has a job. She makes $70-something thousand a year. So happy for her. Now, initially, Richard, who she is supposed to be working for, is kind of I don't know, she seems kind of vanilla. Are we sure about this? And everyone else is like, yeah, she's gonna be great. She's gonna be fine. She's so cute and perfect. Everyone's gonna love her. She ends up getting fired after a very short period of time on the job because Richard is convinced that she's too vanilla to have this job. Frankly, I agree with him. She should not have gotten this job in the first place. However, Cameron Cole has different ideas. And thanks to the help of her best friend Tara, who I think her girlfriend had the job before Mia got it, and then she left for some reason. She's basically okay, you want to get your job back because you got fired. You got to do something that is going to blow Richard's socks off and show him that you're a big, sexy adult lady who knows what she's doing and is not afraid of kink, essentially. And what she does to get her job back is she wears a sexy outfit, she puts on some sexy music, and she masturbates in front of Richard. And this apparently was good enough to get her job back for some reason. It ends up working. from there, there's more sort of weird workplace sexual scenarios that happen both between her and Richard and her and Cameron. And like, I don't understand Cameron as a character because initially everyone's like, ooh, watch out for Cameron. Just like vague warnings, right? So like I got the hint that Cameron was a bad guy and he acts like a bad guy, but he's also supposed to be like the third leg of this romantic sex triangle. And all you have to know is the entire time I was reading this, I was picturing him as Jack Hyde from the 50 Shades franchise. So there you go. What ends up happening is Cameron takes her down to the dungeon area, which she is not supposed to be in, to show her around, like, hey, introduce you to BDSM, let's see how this goes. He puts her up on a St. Andrew's cross. The entire thing is incredibly creepy to read about. Richard finds out that this happens. He is very angry. And then he decides the solution is to do a punishment spanking on his employee in a BDSM dungeon. Now keep in mind, he fired her because she made like a small typing mistake, but it was really because she was too vanilla. He has ridiculed her for being too innocent and vanilla, because I guess when boys like girls, they tease them even when they're in their 30s. And he does a spanking on her that involves sexual contact. She does the whole wilting flower Anastasia Steele thing of like, oh, but I'm actually a virgin. And then he's horrified. He's like, oh my God, I have sexually touched a virgin. I have shown you things that you should not have seen. And it's like, maybe you should have double checked that before you did a sexual assault on one of your employees. However, there is no HR department at this workplace. If they were, I'm assuming they would be a dom and would do nothing to stop this. So the plot continues. Cameron continues his frankly evil machinations about basically forcing her into being a submissive. Like, everyone warns her to not trust Cameron. Richard's like, don't trust Cameron. Tell me whenever you talk to him, you shouldn't trust him. And then she's like, okay. And then just immediately trusts Cameron anyways, and is basically lured into being a submissive escort with him at a very fancy dinner with a political bigwig. And the implication is that this political guy intends to take her home and like do sex/kink stuff with her. Richard finds out about this. He's upset. Nothing happens. Everything keeps going. There are no consequences. And everything eventually comes to a head when she sneaks into this party called Chrysalis that the people at Enthrall put on, which is kind of this eyes wide shut derivative party. We're like, oh, you're not going to be able to handle going there because it's really intense and it like transforms people. And Cameron ends up like finding her and cornering her, and there's this whole like love triangle thing with Richard, and there's a pool, and somehow this ends up with her and Richard finally getting together and like admitting their true feelings. And it's just, how did any of this happen? How did we get from point A to point B? There is BDSM in this book. Kinky stuff does happen, but here's the thing. At no point does Mia actually seem to like doing BDSM. This is very similar again to the Anastasia Steele thing. So I'm going to read you a very telling quote from this book about a girl named Courtney that is going to see Richard as part of a pre-planned scene because Richard is a pro-dom, and she has this whole conflict about it. Surely she wasn't ready for whatever lay in the bowels of this place, when pain was just another way of passing the time. Surely she'd have more fun on a shopping trip to Bloomingdale's, or lunch with her friends, or maybe therapy should be a first consideration. Maybe, Mia, we don't need the judgment actually, keep in mind, this is after like 80% of what I just talked about, and every single BDSM thing that she does like makes her hot and aroused and like on the verge of orgasm at all times. So like, pot calling the kettle black here much? And I think really the biggest problem I have with this book isn't even like Mia kind of being anti-BDSM while also doing BDSM, but it's Cameron's character. Like, again, he just like comes off as like straight evil to me. Like, he is manipulative, he tricks Richard, he tricks Mia, he tricks everyone around him. Everyone goes from like saying he's dangerous to like being okay with his behavior. It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. And you know what really doesn't make sense is the ending of this book, because it ends with him going on like a Christian Grey helicopter ride to go see Mia's father, who she has thought was dead since she was a child, to go like confront him on like his grape farm or whatever, and just, what? What? It does not make any sense. This book was incredibly confusing. I do not know why it has the reviews that it has on Amazon. I am deeply disturbed. I am troubled. I do not understand this book. It is confusing. Now, after the absolutely insane ride that was the last book that I read, I wanted something familiar. I wanted something that I kind of knew how it was gonna go. And so I decided to read another book by Charisse Sinclair called The Dom's Dungeon. Now, this one came out in 2013, so it is one of her older books. And I think it had also been reprinted, so it may actually be an older story than that, but we have read two of Charisse Sinclair's previous books. She is really popular, and I was curious to see how this book compared to some of her more recent works, because she has had so much more time to develop as a writer. And also, this one is a standalone book, and I really like it when I don't have to necessarily invest in a series when I get into reading about BDSM erotica. But let's see how this goes, and start off with the blurb on the back of the book. Foster child, teenage hooer, now a veterinarian, Mackenzie's turned her life around, but the scars remain. She saves her affection for the animals who never judge or scorn her. But it's time to get out, move on from her past in Iowa. So she arranges a vacation exchange to job hunt in Seattle. Although the house is lovely, one room is locked. Her years in foster care have given her two, quote, gifts: a neuroses about locked doors and the ability to open them. After she gets into the room, she's appalled and intrigued. Chains and manacles, whips and paddles, odd benches with straps. When Alex returns home days early and finds Mackenzie draped over the spanking bench in his locked dungeon, he's furious. But her wariness arouses his protective nature and curiosity. So he strikes a deal to keep her close. She'll act as his submissive in exchange for a place to stay and help finding a job. He'd planned to use the veterinarian to deter an ex-girlfriend, not replace her. But with Mackenzie's compelling mixture of strength and vulnerability, the little sub slides right into his well-defined heart. So I'll just tell you right now, if you have read any of Charisse Sinclair's other books, you know this character, right? She's curvy, blonde, curly hair, novice submissive, doesn't know how pretty she is, loves animals in general and cats in specific. Mix and match, it's pretty similar to a lot of the books that she's written. Now, considering the fact that this is set in Seattle, there's some little events that happen, like going to a charity ball and picking out a dress and having this like hidden sex room in a mansion, it's pretty clear that this was at least inspired in part by the success of 50 Shades of Grey. However, I would say that the similarities really end there. Now, that does not make this book good or believable in any way, because the way that this starts is just, okay, I can believe that she picks locks. I can believe that he comes home early. The reason why he comes home early is because he gets in a knife fight in the middle of SeaTac Airport with somebody trying to steal a woman's purse. He drives home with a stab wound, and instead of getting medical attention, because I guess he can't stop by an urgent care first, he goes straight home and he sees this girl on his spanking bench, and he's like, I know, I will punish her with a spanking because her butt just looks so good. So he literally has a wound, a gaping knife wound in his body, and he's like, I will administer a spanking as I could be slowly bleeding to death. You can't make this shit up, folks. It's super, it's so funny to me. It's so funny to me. And you know what? Out of all the books that I read for this review, I would say this one is, you know, it's the most forgettable. Like, the whole setup is that, like, oh, like, I'm gonna use you to basically get my crazy ex-girlfriend to stop bothering me, and like they recognize that it's really problematic because like she is literally dependent on his good graces to have a place to stay while she tries to find a job because she is literally broke, and he, I guess, is somehow influential in the vet community in Seattle because reasons, and so they're like, yeah, I guess this will work, and it's like, no, it won't. This is bad. Don't teach people this is okay. It's not okay. And, you know, there's some mild BDSM. There's some kind of touching moments between other characters and their DS relationships that are, like, in his circle. But the main thing that stuck with me, besides the knife wound, is there's a scene at a public club, and just like I think it was with like I Will Not Beg, which is one of her recent books, there's a scene where like, ooh, introducing the newbie to like BDSM dungeon. That same thing happens here. But what ends up happening that blows my mind is they're at the BDSM club. She's like, I have to go to the bathroom, and he's like, okay, I guess you can pee, slave. And so she goes to the bathroom, or she's trying to go to the restroom at least, or she's either going or she came out of the bathroom. I don't remember. That's not important. What is important is some guy at the club, just some guy, gets a note at the bar that's like, look for this girl. We're doing this scene. It's like a takedown capture scene. It's your job to like kidnap this girl and then like whip her as punishment. And this guy doesn't question this at all and sees Mackenzie and is like, oh, that's the girl I need to kidnap. And there's this whole like dramatic moment where he like kidnaps her and is gonna start whipping her, and then it takes like everyone confronting him to be like, oh, that's a bad idea. I may actually be playing with the wrong person, and maybe I shouldn't listen to a random note left at the bar for me that says to do a CNC scene with a newbie I've never seen at this club before. And what BDSM clubs are you people going to? What is happening here? The things that people do for drama, I don't understand. The one warning I have to give if you do decide to read this book is the character has a few annoying habits. So this book tries really hard to be like, oh, she's like a normal, average, nerdy girl, and she likes nerd things. Do they show that by going to PAX West? Do they show that by going to a board game cafe? Do they show that by doing a sensory deprivation scene where she has, I don't know, the theme music from Star Trek pumped into headphones for 2 hours? No, they don't. They tell you. And the way that they tell you is she says this thing. I think it's frack. It's F-R-A-K. And she says it instead of every other swear word at all possible times in the book, both internally and externally. It literally happens every 3 pages. it is a little bit excessive. And the only other time we get a nerd reference is when she goes to the BDSM club. She compares her experience to feeling like when Picard was assimilated by the Borg. Which is like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to believe that she is a nerd by being annoying as fuck and making a Battlestar Galactica reference every 3 pages. I do not understand why this was necessary. I think there are so many opportunities to have set pieces that demonstrate the nature of the character and their personality without it having to be this like when you notice it, you notice it. It's very annoying. It's very distracting. It's like, I've had this experience reading like fantasy before where like the author tries really hard to do like a Clockwork Orange thing where they like invent a bunch of slang language, and it's like from the first page it's out there and it's like it feels really forced. It does not feel like genuine dialogue, and it is incredibly distracting. Now, all of this being said, I do not think it is a bad book. I think the premise is kind of funny, like, oh no, he has power over my reputation as a veterinarian. Like, what? The premise is funny. It is not insulting as a book. If you do like her writing, if you do like her standard stock character, I think her more recent books, like I Will Not Beg, are much better kink representations and are much more believable, so I would go towards those ones instead. So the last book that I have to review for you all today, it's not a mistake, but it wasn't the book that I was supposed to be reading. I was originally going to read The Siren because so many people have asked me about that book and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I try to do like one like big popular book in these reviews and then do some like smaller, lesser known books just to like have a little bit of variety, find new authors, all of that good stuff. And instead, when I was going to buy The Siren on Amazon, you know how you get that little like recommended for you thing at the bottom of Amazon where it's like recommended books for your Kindle reading list? And it was a literally brand new book called At His Mercy by Claire Thompson, and we actually reviewed one of her books I think last time called No Safe Word, and this was like literally published that day. Now I am usually like a decade late to the book party, so to have something that was published that day that was literally hot off the presses, I was like, oh, of course I have to talk about this one because it's brand spanking new. And I had problems with No Mercy, but the premise of this book intrigued me. And I thought, well, you know, if you could take like the ideas of No Safe Word and kind of channel it in a little bit more of a realistic direction, I think that could have been really, really good to read. So let us see what my first impression was based on the blurb on the back of the book. Intense, exclusive, invitation only. Do you have what it takes to be a pleasure sub? Masters Club, a private BDSM venue for serious players, is perfect for Dom Cameron Lord, who gives the kink lifestyle everything he's got, except his heart. When he witnesses a lovely sub-girl enduring a botched scene at an NYC public club, he sees her potential. She'll make an excellent addition to the Masters Club, but as he steps closer, he recognizes her, and all bets should have been off. Aspiring young attorney Jess Cooper gets her release at the BDSM clubs around town, where she enjoys letting her inner sub fly. There's nothing better than to be naked and bound, a stranger in black leather behind her wielding a whip. It's the perfect anonymous relief from a stressful work week. Until her worlds collide when Mr. Lord, the super sexy partner at her firm, watches her from the sidelines. Any hope that he hadn't recognized her with her clothes off vanishes the very next day at the office. No, he doesn't say a word about what he saw. His invitation says it all. At His Mercy is the first book in Claire Thompson's new BDSM romance series, The Masters Club. If you enjoy powerful alpha men who aren't afraid to take what they want, but give so much in return to the woman they fall for, then this series is for you. So again, my first impression was like, oh, this is going to be like no safe word, but it's going to be like more romantic. It's set at this BDSM club, which again, I love. That is my favorite setting for books like this. And I had a lot of hope. However, I had to stop for a couple of days while I read this, because when I was about like 40% of the way through, I was really struck by exactly how similar this was to No Safe Word. Not in premise, but in the BDSM scenes. Like, there are so many things that happen that are like, oh, that's in that book, that's in that book, that's in that book. Like, authors have tropes they follow. Authors have, things the readers like that they, kind of go back to again and again. Usually that's like vague ideas or concepts or types of scenes. This is like, in so many places, ripped wholesale from No Safe Word. Like, there's a scene where like this driver in this luxurious car like orders her to do sexual things as she's like on her way to like her new BDSM life. She's a girl that is plucked from obscurity at a normal BDSM club to be part of like an exclusive real BDSM retreat. There's a scene where a suspension ends in a whipping. There's so many of the characters that are the same, right? This creepy older guy that's like really sexual. There's a pair of doms that like both share a submissive together. And like the more I kept reading, oh, there's one I forgot. My least favorite part is they have her do this medical inspection thing to be like, oh, before you can be part of this club, like we have to verify that you don't have any like illnesses or STIs or whatever. And so I knew before I read that, oh, this is going to go in a real sexual direction. This is not going to be like a normal medical exam. And so you get this really intense, invasive like medical play scene with a creepy doctor. Like, again, this is all in No Safe Word. These are apparently two different books, but like, are they though? I'm not convinced. And the plot is different because what ends up happening is the main character, our heroine, Jess, works at a law firm, and she goes to basically an audition to be part of this BDSM club. She is accepted. She becomes a pleasure sub. The truck outside apparently has a problem with this plot line. It is beeping very loudly, and she is basically taught to serve at the will of any of the doms that happen to be there at the club. And that's the plot. There is no plot. That is it. Plucked from obscurity, audition, BDSM club, kink things happen, the end. That's basically it. What, for me, was kind of weird about this book is it was like the first 80% was like No Safe Word and like no romantic things happen, no dates, no romantic overtures. There's sexual stuff that happens, there's sexual tension, but it gets to the point where the romance happens in the last 20% of the book rather. She goes into a very deep subspace while doing a scene with Cameron, and then she's like, I love you. Because everyone knows that when you're deep in subspace, everything you say is entirely accurate and should be held against you for now and forever, and that your headspace is not in any way altered, and that BDSM is not deeply bonding in a way where people could mistake other intense emotions for romantic love. Anyways, this is the start of their romantic relationship, and it suddenly ends with like a time skip where it's like, and now they're getting collared and they're in love and they have this amazing beautiful kink relationship, and it's like, what where did this come from? Because that is not what happens in the rest of this book at all. There are kink scenes. Most of them happen with other people at the club. Most of them happen with other random dominants. And what I find troubling about this book, the reason why I really don't like it, and I was super, super happy about this book. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I love the idea. I love the premise. The book spends so much time shitting on mainstream BDSM, claiming that people that go to public BDSM clubs are not doing real BDSM, that public clubs are full of dangerous predator doms, or doms that are fake and don't know what they're doing, and that these clubs are also full of fake submissives. Like literally every opportunity is like, we're doing real BDSM, and those people over there, they're doing fake BDSM. And you know what? The more I hear people impugning the level of play that you do as being real or fake, the more I'm like, oh, newbie. Great. Somebody's trying to find a way to kind of get one over and show like how big and tough they are. And just, it's really, really off-putting. And it's also weird. Most of what they do in this book is the same run-of-the-mill standard BDSM that you see in any erotica, right? It's not really that extreme. The most extreme thing that happens is there is a predicament bondage scene with two girls that both have new but healed nipple piercings. I have had nipple piercings. There is no such thing as new and healed. They are either new or healed. And by healed, I mean they got them 9 months to a year ago at minimum. But there is a predicament bondage scene where they basically get their nipple rings pulled on. And that's like how extreme it is like playing with piercings. I just kept visualizing the very small rings that they were pierced with, just cheese gratering through their nipples. That luckily didn't happen, but it could have. And there is one phrase in particular that actually Cameron says that really, really stuck out to me. I found the same thing in reverse back in my public club days. Women who'd never had any particular interest in DS read a BDSM pulp novel, read 50 Shades of Grey, for their book club. Now they think they're into the scene, but all they really want is maybe a blindfold or a playful pretend spanking. I'm sorry, what's a pretend spanking? Is that like where you fake doing a spank and then you like stop like right before you hit the butt? Is that what that is? I don't get it. It is so weird to me because this book comes off like it's condescending to the audience. It's condescending to me. I don't like it. I didn't ask for it. And I think, you know, kind of going back to my role as a BDSM educator, we know that people do find, they just talked about the fact that people find BDSM clubs, they find the world of kink through reading erotica. And the message that this book is telegraphing is public clubs are dangerous. People that play in public are not to be trusted. Public BDSM is not real BDSM. If you want to do real BDSM, you have to go to a private club where submissives are rewarded for having as few limits as possible, and that being a submissive looks like one very specific thing and nothing else, and if you don't do that, you are a fake submissive. Like, oh my God, I could not possibly think of more damaging things to contribute to an audience that maybe wants to get into BDSM, like playing in private with strangers that are trying to mentor you sexually is not how you have a good BDSM experience. Like, it's actually mildly horrifying. It's really, really not good. And I can't tell if the author actually likes BDSM or just likes shitting on other people for not having apparently the exact same carbon copy fantasy as her that she evidently writes, at least in all of her first books in her series, which is just really, really, really disappointing. And I know that people are adults. I know that people can separate fantasy from reality, but I think the messaging around public clubs being the dangerous ones and private clubs being the safe ones, and that submission needing to be something very particular is just, no. I don't want it. I don't like it. I don't recommend it. Probably not going to be reading anything else from her. Really, really, really disappointed. Now, again, I know I was probably really tough on people in this video. I genuinely am trying to find a BDSM erotica book that I like. I don't make these because I want to be angry at people. I don't make these because I want to be rude to erotica authors. I want to find something that I am like, hey, this is, you know, a fair to decent representation of real kink. these characters feel real. You know, I want that, but I haven't found it yet. So if you did like this, I will have my other BDSM book reviews linked below. If you want to make sure to not miss out on any other videos that I make, I do actually try to educate people about kink and BDSM. So if you do want to learn more about this community from an accurate perspective, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about kink and BDSM related topics. And if you enjoyed this, if you want to support me through all this horrible pain that I went through for your benefit, please consider subscribing to my Patreon. We are currently trying to get to 1,000 patrons, and when that does happen, I will be able to make more exclusive content that I have not been able to make on this channel before. If you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.